Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the SWestrans Board on Friday the 30th of January 2026. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the public recording will be made available on the website for public listening following this meeting. Remote participants on Teams, please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones, switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute, or you could raise your virtual hand. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. Please speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. So if we move on to agenda item 1, which is the sediment and apologies. Claire, can you confirm who's present today?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good morning. I can confirm I've received 2 apologies today, one from Councillor Dickie Campbell and the other one from Councillor David Ingalls. We've got 5 board members present, 2 here in the hall, being yourself and Councillor Hislop, 3 present on Teams, being the Vice Chair, Keith Walters and Sean Marshall. Sean is substitute for Dickie Campbell today, and Stephanie Mottram, our NHS representative, is currently not present. We also have 4 observers present today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. So if we move on to agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Do any board members have any declarations or statement of connections they wish to make? Don't see anyone wishing to come in, so we'll move on to agenda item 3, which is the minute of the meeting on the 4th of December 2025. This is for approval. Are we happy to approve?
Agreed.
Agreed in the room. Silence online, I'll take that as acceptance. We move on to item 4, which is Stranraer Station Feasibility Study Network Rail presentation. We have Grant Coulthart here and Matthew Powell from Network Rail to provide a presentation. Firstly, can we deal with the first recommendation and agree to receive the presentation from Network Rail? We in agreement? Okay. So over to yourself then, Matthew.
Thank you and good morning. My name's Matthew Powell, and I'm the Head of Sponsorship for Network Rail, Scotland's Railway. On the presentation now you can see a view of a potential future, the art of the possible, what we might be able to do at Stranraer. And this is the view from our Glasgow office, the network wrap, how the railway sees Stranraer at the moment, right down at the end of the line. And it's a line and a station that was designed for a very different railway service travel, with the much as you all know about, far more than me, the change in how people have used the line over the years from a ferry connection to what it is today. So Stranraer, for those who need a little reminder, and more importantly, the rather unusual location of the station, given that there is no ferry. But it is quite an experience actually going down to Stranraer, and quite a special location. Our architects are most taken by the views from the pier, and we're slightly less taken by the current station, and we're most curious as to why the sides were covered so that you couldn't see out of the wonderful views over the loch, until they stepped out into the rain, which was coming in sideways, and were entirely then aware of why the side of the station is currently covered. But it can be absolutely beautiful down there, and an opportunity that they've seen in how you could redesign things to be a catalyst for redevelopment or regeneration in a town. So this is the slightly challenging site as it is seen from the road bridge, which crosses the line just as it enters to the pier. My choice of words and illustrations there are not quite ideal given the projection in the room, but obviously you can see the line going straight to the end of the pier. We've looked at two options for relocating the station, which is something that we've been asked about for many years now, that there is no need to go out into the middle of the loch to catch a train. And those are, having dismissed a number of locations in our initial report, what is wonderfully known as option B, which is basically against the existing track at the town end. And then option C, which you might be able to make out, which is trying to take the railway over towards the new mobility hub that is underway and bringing the railway closer to the town. So those are the two locations I'll be briefly talking about today. And just to remind ourselves of what is the problem for our passengers and visitors to Stranraer, which is it's basically a 10 to 15 minute walk out to the loch under what has now become quite a unpleasant walking experience along the pier, shall we say. So the report on the left my team did internally, which was just to identify what might be the art of the possible. And then with a small amount of funding from Transport Scotland, who were keen to help us articulate this better than the sort of blobs on a page that my team are capable of, we were able to commission an Edinburgh-based architect to do a feasibility study. What we've tried to use is a new concept within Network Rail, which is called our hub station concept. We are aware from feedback that new stations are not aesthetically pleasing. They can be quite utilitarian type affairs of a concrete platform and a bus shelter, and it's not a catalyst to regenerate a town. So down in the centre of Network Rail, they've come up with this hub station concept to try and give a kit of parts, sort of IKEA style, but which have all been architecturally designed, which means it's actually cheaper for each station that you then do, because you can choose from a selection of pre-designed items. And they're very keen on this sort of clock tower concept to really visually anchor the station and give it a sense of place, rather than simply being somewhere you can get on and off the train. There's quite a lot to think about in the area in terms of what else is going on, but one of the things they were really keen to do was make sure that it really linked up with the town. It wasn't just about putting it in the most convenient place for the railway, but how it actually suited those who would use the station and how it would sit as part of a town redevelopment. Whilst there are lots of exciting pictures of what else might be done in that area, we've just left everything grey at the moment to kind of point out that this is not does not rely on anything else that may or may not happen in the area, simply just to show how these two options could sit. So this is what's known as option C. And what we have done is just looking at the art of the possible in terms of track curvature, because there are limits to that. What you could do to actually curve the railway round and bring a station as close as possible to the people and other facilities that there are. This gives you a view from the tower that there is there as to what something like this might sit like, and the other object in the black outline in the centre of the screen is the mobility hub that is being progressed by yourselves. So that's option C. The other one, which is option B, this was actually our architects' favoured option, because they really enjoyed how you could create this sort of boulevard approach straight from the town that sort of almost lines up and creates quite a nice bit of urban realm public space there, and also still gives you that sort of quite unique view from the platform out onto the loch. And that was certainly their favourite. Not that we're picking anything at this stage. This is just to show what could be possible if people wanted to make this happen. There is also a sub-option of that, which if land needs to be minimised in some way, what would it look like if you had the station in probably what railway engineers would have picked rather than architects, which is as soon as you come under the road bridge, pop a station there, and that's kind of job done. It doesn't actually create much as it seems physically close to the town. It's not actually closer in terms of walking because of the way the main road raises up. You wouldn't be able to just sort of walk straight out onto the road. You'd have to basically walk out the same way you would on the previous option. And just again, how that would look actually from the town. So there's a number of pros and cons to the broad categories of B and C. Broadly, one of the key attributes here is land ownership and the willingness of parties to work together in this space. I think there is a great opportunity for that in either of these, but that would need to be worked through. From a station railway perspective, the facilities would be identical in either. And our architects have, in their view, from the people aspect, tried to rate what they see as pros and cons. You can see they have a view, but again, everything remains on the table. We're not choosing anything at such an early stage, just showing the art of the possible. And again, just from their perspective, as I said, how that particular option joins up really nicely with the rest of the town. And indeed, doesn't it really impede anything else that might be proposed in the future to make use of the rest of the land that has been vacated there. So here we go, some more pretty pictures for those who like to visualise these things of what could be possible. And so trying to do more than simply just a platform and a bus shelter to replace what's there today. And for those of you who are really into your visuals, you could scan those QR codes in due course, and you can actually virtually walk around using your phone if that's of interest to you. So that's just a brief canter through the work that we've done. There are many questions from this stage that we've not attempted to answer, such as, the subject of money and land ownership and other things such as that, and particularly what would we do with what we vacate at the end of the pier in terms of that building and other infrastructure down there, all of which is to be discussed. So open to questions, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So I'll open it up to comments, questions. Councillor Hislop.
Chair, it would appear to be a really good idea in either site. There's benefits for both of them, I would say. You're bringing it closer to the mobility hub. That sounds quite sensible, having everything together. Good luck, and hopefully money follows.
Thank you for that. Councillor Walters.
Thanks, Chair. No, just to ask where the process is in terms of actually deciding between those two options. Obviously, the money aspect would fall in. What sort of timescale are we looking at in terms of deciding? Thanks.
So I think a key next step is for Network Rail and Stena to have some conversations. Certainly, one of those options would be predicated on the use of land that is currently owned by Stena. It's the one that would bring the railway round to the mobility hub. And frankly, the complexity of the land ownership there means nothing really that we've shown today could be done in isolation without their input and agreement. It's hoped that they would be willing to support and contribute to such a scheme, but we're in very early days of those conversations, but they are very open to those conversations. We are commissioning a full land, what's the technical term, to confirm all the land ownership there, because it's a wonderfully complex thing where once upon a time I believe it was all the railways, and then through various breaking up of British Rail, Sea-Link and all such things, there is a wonderful collection of different landowners of that complicated area, and indeed the Crown Estate. I believe we lease it all from them ultimately. So that needs to be understood. But we're keen to move quite quickly. We have a separate project that is investing in the signalling on the line. And it would make so much sense if these two things could be done in parallel. It would save us having to re-signal assets on the pier that perhaps would not be required in some of the options we have here. And that scheme is to be delivered in the next 3 years, the re-signalling. So ultimately, Network Rail is not funded to do this, but I think we would like to bring parties together to make this happen. So that's certainly, we're trying to take a convening role as much as that is our role, but that would rely entirely on Dumfries and Galloway and indeed Stena to want to work together on this one, possibly even the Scottish Government.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for the presentation. That's really interesting, and they look good proposals. I take it there's 3 options on the table: B, B1, and C. I'm just wondering what happens with the next stage, because obviously the next stage will be, are we going to get costings for each of those 3 options, or do we pick an option and then get a costing for that? I'm just wondering how we move this forward.
Yes, so we talk about it in terms of 2 options, and there are 2 flavours of B, if you will. So yes, I'll give you 3 options if that's how you'd like to put it. I think there's a fundamental choice between B and C, and then the exact location on the pier of the B station can be worked out in due course, possibly from an engineering perspective as well. C will be more expensive than B, because B could be done without touching the railway, and C would require new railway, and new railway does cost money. From a cost perspective, we've taken a very sort of building blocks, high-level perspective of this. We are delivering various platform rebuilds all the time, and I think just a platform alone here could cost £1.5 million, and that's before you do any of the nice and actually quite vital passenger experience aspects and architectural aspects. However, because this is a kit of parts, all the design has already been done for all those architectural aspects. And again, that, depending on what we actually choose, could only be £500,000 to £1 million in itself. So then, car parks, urban realm, utilities, etc. We would like to be able to put a number on this that is less than 5 million, which from a railway perspective, and I don't wish to sound like we spend lots of money, but stations such as the new station at Bow Grey, etc., are coming in between 14 and 18 million. So we are actually hoping this new approach is significantly cheaper without looking cheaper. In fact, we'd hope it would look considerably better, because it's had some really good architectural elements from the beginning.
Thank you.
Can I just quickly come back? Thanks for that explanation. And obviously, option C is the more expensive option, but it probably is the one that brings it closest to the town centre. But in option C, I did notice as well that you would want to retain part of the existing rail infrastructure out onto the pier. And would that be for use by Network Rail, to maybe store? Or I'm just wondering what the advantage would be for keeping that, even if you have the line off that goes further into the town.
Yes, of course. So the work we've been doing on the re-signalling has identified exactly what is actually required from an infrastructure perspective at Stranraer. We want to learn from a number of historic rationalisations at sort of seaside termini, some of which are being undone elsewhere in the UK, such as they're redoubling parts of the Newquay branch in Cornwall. A single platform with a single track really minimises what's possible in the future. from talking to charter train operators who would be interested in running tourist trains down here on occasion, they need more facility than simply a single platform. They need a siding so that the charter train could be moved out of the way and the ScotRail service continue unimpeded. Now, whether that could be accommodated by having both tracks curve round to the station location, or as we've shown in our drawing, the siding sort of just sits where it is because that's the cheapest way to maintain that, is a level of engineering that is in a future design stage and could be either of those. But what we're really keen to do is not make it so that only the minimum can be done from a railway perspective. We'd like to retain the flexibility for a great operation. The charter operators we've spoken to, the main problem at the moment is the pier and the walk down the pier does not suit the age of the clientele that they tend to carry on such trains. And therefore, if they were to bring something down, they wouldn't even get off. They'd just be the sort of people who wanted to ride on a train. But if we did bring the station close to the town, they would be interested in bringing a train that had, 4 hours stay in Stranraer where people could walk around and actually, bring value to the town.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got Karen Jackson, Vice Chair.
Sorry, thanks, Chair, and thanks for that presentation. Really interesting, and love the visuals and what's possible there, both with architecture and engineering. I think it's really exciting to see what is possible with a particularly iconic location. My question's much more prosaic, and you mentioned it a couple of times while you were talking about the timeline and the budget and the fact that this won't be a quick option. The walk to the station, as you highlight, is a bit of a challenge, and it might be these conversations are happening elsewhere. But is there anything? What could we be doing in the meantime whilst the timeline for the new station is being explored? How can we make that walk to the station? How can we make the experiences enticing for people so that more people are using the rail facility? Thanks.
We just need to work together on that. The land ownership, as I said, means that historically the approach possibly of all parties has been to say it's somebody else's problem. I think I certainly don't have that view. There are passengers, they're your, public, for want of a better phrase. The main owner of that road, I believe, is Stena from the land diagrams I have seen. So we sort of own the railway. Oddly, we don't own the way to the railway, but it is our passengers who would benefit. So I think actually a little three-way working group or more between Network Rail, the council and Stena to actually minimise the feeling of you feel very vulnerable on that walk. Is the underfoot conditions safe enough? What's the lighting? And just how you see through the fences, etc. I mean, there are ways of doing that, whether that's with nice covers to the fences that are branded or different fences or whatever. But yes, it's not a good experience today.
Okay.
Thank you. Now I understand the complexity around that land ownership piece, but I agree we can't not do anything because it's a bit complex. So and I know those conversations are happening elsewhere as well, Chair, but useful that we don't lose sight of that as we look to the future.
Thank you very much. Any observers got any questions, comments? Oh, Igor.
Chair, that piece of ground, when I looked at it, triggered a wee bit of the grey matter moving. Is that the place that just got planning permission on a temporary basis for a lorry park? And was that fed into the planning department so that they knew there may be proposals coming forward?
Yeah, I'm sure there was something mentioned when we approved the plans or the application for that. So, but I'll let Matthew come in.
So yes, conversations were had at that time. So everyone was aware of this. I believe that planning application is end dated, as in there's a period of time. Whether that, I mean, some things in the railway move glacially. I don't think people believe that we'd be popping down next week to do this, and we won't, because you know, we're at the very early stages. So I think that can work really well together. You know, we would probably want to move faster than that. Whether we're capable, I'm not sure, but we should certainly try.
Yeah, and I'm pretty certain that the place plan was also mentioned, Stranraer, so when it came to planning application.
It was just the fact that you did mention you're looking to do the signalling within the next 3 years, and I think it was a 3-year permission we had given for the thing, so it might tie in, or it might have just overlapped and caused an issue, but hopefully it ties in.
You would hope that the parties were willing to work together regardless of the paperwork, but maybe I'm naive.
Okay, so I'm looking in the room. Any observers got any questions? I see Laura Moody's online. Right, so I've got Douglas, then Laura, and then is it Stuart? Yeah. Okay, so Douglas first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I've been involved in this project for a few decades, and it's good to see things moving along. One of the key issues has always been the heritage aspect of the existing station, because it's almost unique in its location at the end of the pier, and I would hope that that would still be taken into consideration with any options going forward. I know you kind of answered that when you spoke to Sean, but just to make sure, it's not really a question, but just a plea that those heritage issues are taken forward, because when we get to public consultation, it will be something that will be key to the public down in that area and those who love the railway.
Indeed, and we don't have the greatest track record, if I'm honest, on looking after heritage buildings that are no longer in operational use. Some people might say we don't have the best reputation for the ones that are in operational use, but we are limited by our funding, as everyone is. So before we embark on this endeavour as a group, we need to absolutely know what we want to do with that structure. Otherwise, it has every possibility of falling into rack and ruin and going in the way of, dare I mention it, Air Station Hotel. So we need to be careful how we approach that and have a plan. And I hate to say these words out loud in a council office, but it isn't currently listed, is my understanding. So what we do with it is very much up for wide debate.
Okay, so Laura Moody next, and then Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. From the perspective of the bus users group, and having spent several minutes, even, never mind hours, stood at bus stops on Pot Roadie and Marine Gardens, the exposed location of this site, scenic though it is and historic though it is going to be a problem for bus users. So I'm wondering if SWestrans can commit to timed connections and things like that to make sure that we're limiting the amount of time bus users are potentially stood waiting for buses to and from the station. And my second question relates to SWestrans' long-term goal or aim of potentially reopening the Dumfries-Stranraer line. From my perspective, the previous town station would probably have been a better fit for that long-term goal. So I'm interested to hear how either of these options would impact that long-term plan.
So your questions are directed to SWestrans, although this is a presentation from Network Rail. So do you want to pick this one up, Simon?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your question, Laura. Just taking them in order, first question in relation to the change of the location of the station and impacts in terms of integration and connectivity between bus and rail. You make an excellent point. We certainly need to look into that. Obviously work in partnership with DGC buses who operate services in that area and ensure that both timings and locations of stops are fully considered. So I think that's an excellent point, certainly one that we'd pick up as part of this to ensure, as we always do, that bus and rail integration is as well considered as possible. Excuse me, in terms of your second point around the longer term ambition, and indeed the ambition contained within the regional transport strategy relating to the reopening of the Dumfries to Stranraer line, we've been involved in some conversations about that in recent weeks and months with Transport Scotland. And I think we've been open and honest with the board in terms of that remaining a long-term ambition. Certainly barriers and obstacles that exist in the short term, and Transport Scotland has been very clear on that in terms of the availability of funding, both in terms of the significant funding that would be involved in reopening that line, but also in first order, the challenge of finding funding to progress with a feasibility or indeed an appraisal of that line. So in terms of the changing of the station, I think it's probably too early to say in terms of what significance that would have in terms of the viability of that. Simply said, it's not looking very viable in the short term in terms of that reopening of the line in general.
Thank you. Stuart.
Thank you. I was curious, in the case of options B where it's shortened as well as option C, do you have anything in place to maintain access to the wider area of the pier if that is used for any other purposes later down the line? And if it hasn't been accounted for, how do you think making provisions to maintain access to that will affect the cost of it? Thank you.
Accessing the rest of the pier is very different on the two options. I mean, C does cut across what is today certainly the driving route down the pier. It is possible to get round via the other side of the mobility hub, but that whole development or whatever it is that comes there would absolutely have to plan around there. We would not want any sort of route across the track, if that makes sense. Which means if sort of a reopened or sort of I'm thinking like they've done various things in other parts of Britain, such as the Folkestone Harbour branch where the railway was withdrawn from there, and you can make quite a nice urban sort of walk down the former track, etc. There's quite a lot you could do from that front, but B would probably make that as easy as possible, while C puts a few more constraints on it, but not impossible by any stretch.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, comments, thank you very much for your presentation. And are we happy to note the proposal of the Stranraer railway stations, or the proposals? Get nods in the room, so thank you again for your presentation. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but I'm sure you'll be quite busy. So
thank you very much. I'll slip out, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, board, we'll just move on to agenda item 5, which is the SWestrans staffing structure. Karen Brownlee, Assistant Director of Transport and Infrastructure, Dumfries and Galloway Council, is here to assist. And Karen, do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you very much, Chair. And if I may, I might just give a little bit of background to set the scene for this report. So the board will be aware that, over the almost 2 years, the SWestrans team have had interim management arrangements in place, which I guess over that last 2 years, whilst a significant amount of projects and work has progressed, there hasn't been that stable environment which I would like to see going forward. So over the last year or so, I guess my focus has been to ensure that we've got a permanent structure in place to ensure stability for team members, to ensure improved collaboration, and to support all team members and to streamline processes that we have in place. I'm now, I guess, looking to the future and what that looks like, and I want to ensure that both SWestrans and the Council Transport's team are sustainable to deliver key services within our communities going forward. So the report contains a lot of information there in terms of the processes that we've gone through, the trials that we've gone through over the last year or so. But I guess what was highlighted to myself when reading the report again was I'm really keen that this is a collaborative, supportive approach going forward. And if members, if the board wanted to just, I guess, ensure and reinforce that collaborative working, happy to consider, that potential for a further recommendation just to fully commit to, the chair and vice chair on behalf of the board, working in partnership with myself to go through that sort of recruitment process, just to give that oversight and that stability going forward. So happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that there's a recommendation 3, which is not in the report paper at the moment. Is there any way we can maybe get that?
Yes.
So that everyone...
Sorry, yes, Chair,
yeah.
I can put that in the chat.
Put it in the chat.
Yeah,
Thanks very much, Claire. I appreciate that. So I'll open it up to board members first of all. So I've got Councillor Marshall and followed by Vice Chair Karen Jackson. So Sean.
Yeah. Thank you. And first of all, can I probably commend the SWestrans team for what's been probably a challenging year, and hopefully this proposal will provide more support and more resource. I've got a number of questions. So first of all, when I was looking at the existing structure and the proposed new structure, I was just trying to match the officers that are in the existing structure. Now, there's an admin officer there, and I'm just wondering where they sit within the new structure. I've managed to kind of map most of what the existing structure is over into the new structure, but there's just a couple of positions here. I'm just wondering what would happen with those. And also, I know that the SWestrans graduate is temporary, but I would hope that going forward, with our graduates programme, that we could get additional support from that. My second question really is with regards to the process and governance going forward. So if we agree this at SWestrans today, assuming that because it also affects the transport and operations structure and team within E&I, then a subsequent report would probably go to E&I as well. At a future date, there's a meeting next week, but obviously there's nothing on regarding this, and that's because probably it's awaiting a decision here. And the third question really is with regards to moving forward in this new structure. I think most members will be aware that at E&I just last year, due to the situation with the buses, etc., we have agreed to commission 2 pieces of work. One is to look at the sustainable public transport model, and the other is to look at the future opportunities for DGC buses, which includes the potential for it to be a municipal operator. So I'm just wondering how the new structure, does that lend itself to that if the eventuality is that there's going to be further development after these 2 pieces of work? And probably a question along with that is as well, the 2 pieces of work we've agreed, which I believe are out looking for consultants to actually do this work, that doesn't affect any of the structure there or the work of the officers at the moment. This will be additional work compared to what the structure or proposed new structure is. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you. So 3 questions there. Are you coming in first, Karen?
Thanks very much, Chair. If it's okay, we'll answer them in order, and I'll ask Gordon to respond to the admin officer and the SWestrans graduate, and then I'll come back in and pick up the other 2 questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gordon.
Through yourself, Chair. Good morning. Thank you, Councillor Marshall. The admin officer that's in the existing structure within the SWestrans team is through temporary funding. There is a hope to maintain that funding, and that position will naturally help support ongoing within the larger administrative team that will sit across the structure. Thank you.
So can I confirm then that admin officer post isn't included at the moment in the new structure?
It's not in the proposed structure because it's a temporary position, Councillor Marshall, but we are intending and reapplying for the funding to maintain that.
Thank you. And the graduate?
The graduate, who's coming in? Yes, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for your question, Councillor Marshall. I'm happy to come in on the graduate question. So we have a graduate currently placed within the SWestrans team. She's a member of the Council's Graduate Inspire programme, and that programme works through the opportunity being made available to teams across the Council to essentially pitch for graduates as part of that programme. SWestrans pitched for a graduate and we were successful in getting one, and obviously a decision for Gordon as part of the integration of operational SWestrans staff, but I would expect that where there's suitable opportunities available for graduates in future and where there's opportunities that exist, that would continue to be an issue, an opportunity that we continue to try and capture to ensure the additional resource available to graduates, but also to support the graduate programme in general.
Thank you very much. And Karen, you might pick up the other two.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through yourself. So just thank you, Councillor Marshall, for your questions. In terms of the governance, so the reason this report is in front of the board today is due to the standing orders that sit with SWestrans, and as I say, I'm very keen to ensure there's that clear collaborative working approach between Council and SWestrans going forward. Just so the board are aware, transport and infrastructure sits within my remit now. Over the last year, I've been realigning services to ensure there's that stability right across all of transport and infrastructure services, which includes SWestrans, includes transport, includes fleet, for instance. So when we realign services within the Council, that is very much an operational element, just to ensure that services, key services, can be delivered appropriately within the communities. So to answer your question specifically in relation to that one, I would not be bringing a report back to E&I committee in terms of the realignment of services. There's no members of staff at risk, and we are simply putting in that stability element to ensure that services can progress forward. In relation to your third question regarding the decisions that were made at full council last year, through a notice of motion and a special full council, that is a separate piece of work which will work in parallel to the work that officers within SWestrans and the Sustainable Transport team will progress going forward. That will be, as I say, managed through the Council, but in conjunction with SWestrans, so both organisations are taking on that journey, and obviously will be reported back through the appropriate committee within the Council, but also updated reports brought back through SWestrans. I hope that answers your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Karen. And just quickly to come back, so obviously these are significant pieces of work that are going to be done that will potentially affect the service going forward. And I'm just probably trying to get your opinion with regards to, is the new structure that's been suggested, is would that accommodate any changes that are coming down the line? Do you think that structure would suit that as opposed to the existing structure?
Karen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Marshall. Yes, my belief that the structure that we're proposing and the I guess separation of the strategic and the operational elements will absolutely suit whatever changes come down the line in the future. Now, obviously, we'll need to be see what those are, see what comes out of the review as requested by full council last year, but my belief is that this structure will be sustainable for the future of both SWestrans and for I guess sustainable transport going forward. And I think the key for me, and it gives that support for team members, within the operational side of the SWestrans element, and gives them links into that wider sustainable transport network. So thank you.
Thank you. So I've got Vice Chair Karen Jackson, followed by Stephanie Mottram. So Karen.
Thanks, Chair. I'd absolutely echo Councillor Marshall's comments on the work of the team. I think they've done an amazing job over the last 14 months that Simon's been in post. And it's also been really encouraging to see that close collaboration with the council. So I think the procurement exercise really saw that and saw officers going above and beyond, and the pressure and the solutions that they came up with, fantastic to see. I also really appreciated Karen's additional context, and also would really welcome that opportunity for further discussion, which might go slightly further than the recommendation, just to really understand some of the logic behind this and the timing. I wasn't sure as I was reading through the paper that it was giving SWestrans more support and more resource. So interesting that Councillor Marshall was thinking that. So that gives me some reassurance that those close to this are thinking that it's more support. But I did read that with a little bit of concern about that. But perhaps as we look at the lead officer role, that will again kind of strengthen the reassurance. It was helpful to see that really clearly set out in the report that we as SWestrans need to ensure we have necessary staffing support to carry out our functions, and I'd just be really keen that we test that so that the board isn't left with insufficient support or unrealistic expectations on people. It would be also helpful, and I know we've all got to cut our cloth, and I know public sector resources are under massive pressure, but to understand whether this was being driven by cost as well. So I absolutely get that point about the stable management environment, the need for a permanent solution, all really, really sensible things, but it'd be interesting to understand the cost implications as well. And again, as we come to look at the role of the lead officer, we really need to make sure that that is a doable role. So again, realistic expectations on that person. As you read through the paper, there's quite a lot of detail that needs to be worked through, and I think Councillor Marshall and Karen were dealing with that in some of the governance stuff. But on the paragraphs that deal with who does what, the SLA that's being developed. So that's kind of paragraphs 5.2 and 5.3 on page 13. There's a lot of detail there. If things are working fine, it's fine. If they're not, we just need to make sure we've got an SLA that allows us to have that comfort and that reassurance. Similarly, in terms of the SWestrans team, I get that split between strategic and operational, and that there's a real logic behind that, but there's still a team issue. So I think we talk about paragraph 5.5, periodic meetings. How do we maintain a SWestrans team when bits are in different bits SWestrans, bits council, different line management responsibilities. So we just need to think that through really carefully. And as I say, that kind of making sure that the lead officer role is doable. So I think lots in this, lots of opportunity, but I just need a little bit more reassurance that we as a board will be left with sufficient resource to do what we're delegated to do. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So we're seeking assurance, Karen.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and I'll pick up on a couple of points there. Karen, thank you for your comments and questions, and I absolutely appreciate the need for that assurance going forward. I'll pick up on a couple of points, and I'm not sure if Simon and Gordon want to come in with some really good examples where we have we've been trialling this over over the last year or so, so we can provide the board some examples in relation to that. We can also provide a little bit more detail just in terms of the conversations that we've had with legal services, in relation to the SLAs that are within the report, to give that overarching assurance. A couple of points you raised there, Karen, were just in terms of whether this change is driven by cost. So what I would say is, this change is driven by the need to have stability for SWestrans team members, but for SWestrans board, for the local community, for the sustainable transport team, and what we've seen over the last year is that really close working relationships and that joined up approach. We've also seen that there's been duplications in the past in terms of those operational teams, and there has been a need to streamline that. So The SWestrans lead officer role has always been the 0.5 full-time equivalent, and that's what we're absolutely suggesting will continue. But what obviously we're suggesting is there would be that split between that strategic and that operation, just to you know, to try and give I guess that that stability going forward, that streamlining of processes going forward, but also to allow the strategic element to be driven forward, you know, regionally and nationally across Scotland. So not driven by cost, the budget remains the same, you know, the full-time equivalent remains the same to ensure that support is provided to SWestrans, but also to the sustainable transport team as well. I'll maybe pause there and I'll bring in either Simon or Gordon just to pick up on a couple of examples, if that would be okay. Thank you.
I'll bring in Simon first and then follow up by Gordon. Simon.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Karen. And excellent questions and points that you made, Karen. I suppose just in terms of any additional points that I'd add is just in terms of my experience in the role, and I suppose to some extent in terms of the experience of Douglas as lead officer, obviously not having worked with Douglas, but just an understanding from conversation with colleagues in terms of the real challenges that Douglas as lead officer held in that role. And I think that was largely because of the, as Karen's pointed out, the fact that the lead officer was and always has been a 0.5 FTE position. It's been part-time. And so in the context of the future structure, what we're proposing there is that the SWestrans lead officer position will continue to be a 0.5 FTE part-time role. But in actual fact, in terms of day-to-day responsibilities, in terms of what keeps me busy on a day-to-day basis, in terms of the kind of oversight, leadership and management of the local bus network, that will be incorporated within the council on a day-to-day operational basis. And so I think in terms of the, if we can kind of break up the responsibilities of the lead officer role, if possible, then the extent to which the lead officer would have capacity and bandwidth to concentrate on strategic issues, which obviously as a strategic regional transport partnership is a core part of that role and of the RTP itself, then I think that would in actual fact increase in the sense that there's opportunity to engage with strategic partners, ways in which to seek additional funding, bids, collaborate with other RTPs and so on. I think the lead officer would have greater capacity and bandwidth to do that with the support of the policy and project officer and the strategic element of the regional transport partnership that would remain. And then in terms of the operational responsibilities of the team, but also the extent to which the lead officer, me at the current time, has involvement, real detailed involvement in the operational elements, that would pass across to the council and its full capacity and ability to draw upon different resources within that organisation. And so I think that would provide additional resilience in terms of the delivery, the operational delivery of SWestrans as a team, and free up and provide kind of arm's length basis for the lead officer, but also for the strategic aspects of the RTP. And just in terms of kind of real life examples of that, we've really been able to see that over recent months in terms of the way in which this approach has been trialled. So, for example, there's detailed conversations that happen on a day-to-day basis now between SWestrans staff and between transport and operations staff, with the example of the dissemination of updated bus stop timetables, for example, to stops and shelters across the region. That's a real kind of collaborative effort involving a team of operational members within SWestrans and the council, understanding how they can support one another in terms of doing that. And I think that's just one example of ways in which where there's particular pressures, as you pointed out, across the last 12 months. And in fact, the procurement process that took place last summer was a real example of the way in which SWestrans and the council just operated as one with a really effective team approach, drawing upon different skills and expertise across the council. And so I think it's just a kind of a continuation of that.
Gordon, you anything to add?
Yeah, well do, Chair. Thank you, Karen, for your questions. Just to take a wee bit further what Simon was saying about the bus stop example, I think that's a real live example that we're going through the now, and how that was sort of split between the two teams. Just to get an idea of how this works in reality, we have two members of the SWestrans team updating the digital system that produces the timetables, arranging the printing of the timetables. We then have a council operational team who are planning a 4-week programme to roll out the delivery of the timetables, get them across the 1,000 stops that we've got across the region, which involves vehicle resource, staffing, technical staffing. So that's a real collaborative piece of work that if it didn't involve both elements of the team, the SWestrans team in reality would really struggle to roll that out, and or it would cost a lot of money. Both sides of the team can get that done in a shorter, quicker period, and like we say, a wee bit more collaboratively. So I think that's a good live example of how the team will gel. There's also a lot of the same conversations are had with both sides of the team when it comes to contract management, but we're dealing with the same contractors, same suppliers on the bus side of stuff. So that would be reduced. That contract management element would also draw support for the wider structure, where we have more staff, more experienced management to be able to handle some of the more difficult discussions that we absolutely have on a day-to-day basis with, and Simon will confess that we do have with operators. So that level of support is really important that the SWestrans team have that, to make sure that the board's been supported when it comes to the bus network. A couple of other quick points from an administration point of view. When you look at the whole structure, the transportation team that's there and the SWestrans team that's there, although we have a temporary administrative officer within the SWestrans team at the moment, there's never been, if any, administrative support that sits between those teams. Douglas is smiling, so he knows that I'm not telling a fib on that one. But that's the reality. So that administrative function is there to spread across the structure. We can look at increasing that when the mobility hubs come online, which will give us vital links between community transport and the public use of those hubs, how we tie them up to future rail developments. All of that would be contained within that team and working as one sustainable transport unit across that structure. So I think that's an important one to mention as well. And finally, I won't take up too much time, the active travel team. I think, if we're honest, prior to how it works now, we were under a wee bit of a shackle because it was a bit disjointed. There was 2 active travel teams across the council and SWestrans. We now have one team that can really focus on the planning, the active travel and the rollout of that strategic plan over the next 5 years. And between the 3 members of the current active travel team, I think that's starting to work really well. We're starting to bear some of that fruit of that strategic planning and see a level of planning that we've never seen before. On the other side, how that's impacted with the council, we've realised that we can utilise the budget a wee bit better within the roads team to deliver active travel. We still have control of the budget, but the roads technical team will deliver a lot more for our money than we ever did. So hopefully those examples gives you a wee bit of assurance, and happy to elaborate or answer anything more that you need, Karen.
Karen, do you want to come back in?
That's been really helpful, and those examples really bring to life how it would work in practice. So really welcome that additional information. I think that split between operational and strategic again feels really good, and I think we have been missing some of the strategic operations opportunities because Simon just hasn't had that chance, that space, that time in the day to get to some of those regional discussions. So great if we can get into that space a little bit more. I still think and it'll come through a job description, I think, but I still would be really keen to make sure that we are creating a doable lead officer job. So there's bits woven through the paper for good reason, I'm sure, about the lead officer will have a light touch oversight for strategic delivery of active travel and the local bus network as they remain responsibilities of the RTP, despite the functions being embedded in the council. That's at 5.6, I think. But it's just in practice, how can somebody have that light touch if we've separated out the operational and regional? So that's a level of detail that we can get into as we scope a job description. But the additional information has been really helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would you want to come in, Karen? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Vice Chair, for those further comments. And I think, just so that the board are fully aware, there is a draft job description and personal spec currently going through the job evaluation process at this current time. Now that was benchmarked against other strategic lead officers from across Scotland, but more than happy to share that with the board so that you've got that information in front of you. But just wanted to provide you absolute clarity on that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So I've got Stephanie Mottram, followed by Councillor Walters, followed by Councillor Hislop. So Stephanie, good morning.
Morning, thank you. I appreciate the devil's in the detail round about this, but just on the kind of face of it, so my questions are just based on the structure and just some clarification, just to understand a wee bit better. So, I just, given what Karen has said and Gordon said, Gordon mentions a lot about collaborative working, which is great to hear, and Karen obviously seeking that reassurance between strategic and operations. I just wonder, and it's particularly around about your policy projects officers, etc. You know, on the structure, and it's maybe just how it's laid out and how it needs to be laid out. I'm just not clear why we would be ring fencing the policy and projects officer and not having a team of policy and projects officers that could work across the portfolio of strategic and operations, so that you've got a flexible workforce and also a workforce that's developing across that sustainable travel agenda, but also which SWestrans is very much included in. So I wonder if there's opportunities or we're missing opportunities in terms of how we're looking at our policy and projects officer and why that's not in like a project management office structure, which would provide could provide whatever the need was at the given time, rather than separate entities. And again, it's just touching on Karen, just following up on Karen's point as well around about it. It just feels a wee bit that whilst I appreciate the SWestrans agenda and portfolio is reporting into this board, it feels as if it's still sitting on the outskirts, which again, I know we've had reassurance from Gordon about there will be collaborative working, but I just wonder how that works in, you know, on practice on the ground. That may work, but if we are setting this up out with the main body or the sustainable travel agenda, if that will play out in reality. So that's just a couple of points for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gordon, first of all.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stephanie, for questions. Sorry, if I'm picking you up properly on the policy and projects officers, the two that sit under the active travel team leader, those, I suppose it's more in the name of the job than what it is that they actually do. Those two positions will focus more on active travel than they will policy and projects, and that one of the things that comes out of this this structure will be the JDs and how we reevaluate them to reflect what those officers actually do. The other side of the strategic side of the part where you get SWestrans lead, and then you've got two policy and project officers, that's what they'll actually be. They'll be policy and project officers, and they'll have also direct links into the rest of the structure to hopefully link what you're talking about. Is that answered, Stephanie? Or?
Stephanie?
So what you're saying is the policy and projects officer depicted on the structure, they aren't policy and projects officers, they're something different. Is that what you're meaning?
Exactly.
It's just that's what they're depicted as, so it's given a false sense of what's actually in the structure. Is that what we're saying?
It's a legacy name that goes with that role, and like I say, it doesn't actually reflect what the officers currently do or will do going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Stephanie. I've got Councillor Walters followed by Councillor Hislop. Keith?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just want some of the discussion has gone about the proposed structure on page 24, but I'm still left with a few questions really. Looking at page 24 and first of all, there are 4 jobs highlighted as new positions, although one of them is the SWestrans lead officer, which we obviously have at the moment. I just wondered, are those 4 actual new positions, or are they reclaiming of positions that we already have? That's one question, because otherwise we're saying that we're putting in 4 management positions as a sort of solution to going forward. And I would be surprised if there wasn't an operations manager for the workshop technicians already. So that's one question. The second question is about the accountability of SWestrans staff, which are all grouped under the Sustainable Travel Manager management. So, well, is that a SWestrans or is that a council position? And if it is a council position, how are those staff members responsible back either to the lead officer or in the long run to the SWestrans board? I understand that the concept is that it is a cooperative matter, but it's also to do with if SWestrans have staff, they have accountability to the SWestrans organisation. And then the last question is this line that goes between the SWestrans lead officer to the Assistant Director Transport and Infrastructure, is that, which is the dotted line compared to all the other lines, is that meant to indicate that sort of accountability is fed through the Assistant Director Transport and Infrastructure to the SWestrans lead officer and vice versa, so that it's more of a strategic thing? That's my 3 questions.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. Who's coming in first? Karen or Gordon? Karen, okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come in and answer some of those questions. So thank you very much, Councillor Walters, for your questions. So if I can start with the last question first. The SWestrans lead officer does report to myself, so Assistant Director of Transport and Infrastructure, and on a day-to-day basis, that lead officer, so Simon in his current role would report to me, and I would work through I guess the work streams with that lead officer. But I guess the second point, as is shown on page 25, the SWestrans lead officer, and as detailed in the report, also reports to the board, which is yourself. So that's why I guess there's 2 lines there. But I guess on paper, and I'm assuming the board knows this, but SWestrans, I guess employees do have council contracts, so they're on council contracts, council terms and conditions, but do require to adhere to, I guess, the SWestrans organisational processes and procedures and policies that are in place there. So that's why it's quite complex, and I know we've had these discussions previously, but that would be the reason for that one. So as I say, on paper, the SWestrans lead officer would report to myself. In terms of the new positions and I guess the accountability of SWestrans, Gordon, are you happy to pick those questions up? Yeah, I'll hand over to Gordon if that's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. So, on the new, or the yellow boxes, the SWestrans leads obviously existing position, as is the 0.5 FTE policy and projects officer. So those budgets already exist within the current structure. The 2 managers' positions, they are new positions that will be brought in to manage across the structure, as you can see. So those are the only 2 that are new positions to any of the existing structures. And on the accountability question, so as Karen's already sort of pointed out, although that SWestrans officers are legally, in the eyes of contractual, anything contractual and anything legal, they are council employees. However, their day-to-day function will still be centred and prioritised around delivering SWestrans functions. That won't change. That sustainable manager will still manage those members of staff in that way, whether it's contract management for the public transport officer or whether it's active travel within that team. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Has that been helpful, Keith?
Yes, thanks. No, that has been helpful. The accountability issue still comes back, because I've always, having sat on the SWestrans board for a while, I've always been slightly confused as to how it works. But I can see that if they're council employees, that's fine. So where's the budget coming from the two new management positions?
Karen.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll jump back in. So I was going to jump back in before you asked that question, Councillor Walters. So just to give the board assurance, the positions that are within the structure on page 25 are within existing budgets. So there is no additional funding required there, and as I say, are within additional both fleet and transport budgets that are in existence. Thank you.
Keith, you wish to come back
in?
in?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I've got Councillor Hislop in the room, followed by Councillor Marshall. Ivor?
Could I ask Mr Bradbury, as the lead officer or interim lead officer for this independent body, why did you ask for this report? Because all I can see is a report from another body telling us what to do. Now, did you ask for this report? Did you agree to this report? And is it what you want? And why is an independent lead officer having to report back to an outside body? Their direct line of management should be this board, and it should not be to an outside body.
Simon?
Thank you for your question. You're exactly right. So in my role as interim lead officer, it is my responsibility to report to this board. There are different papers and reports that are brought to this board on behalf of partners of the Regional Transport Partnership, of which Dumfries and Galloway Council is one. And as Karen has already pointed out, that the lead officer is on a contract with the council and currently has a relationship and reports to the Assistant Director of Transport and Infrastructure at the council. So the council, as a partner of the Regional Transport Partnership, is welcome to bring a paper to this board, which is what it's done. So I haven't asked for that board for that paper specifically, but the board has been brought, and the paper is on behalf of Karen as the Assistant Director, Transport and Infrastructure. So in my role as lead officer, I've had conversations with Karen and with other colleagues and have fulfilled the two roles, or the two hats, if you like, that the lead officer consistently wears. One as a representative of the council in the sense that it reports to the Assistant Director, and the other hat I've consistently worn is in terms of representing the interests of the board and SWestrans as an RTP. So I've had input to and have supported the interests of SWestrans in that.
Just before I bring you back in, Ivor, Karen, do you want to just add to that?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hislop. And I guess just to add to what Simon has just said, so I had requested for this report to be presented to the board to ensure there was that oversight and to ensure there was that collaborative working going forward, and to ensure that we continued to have good working relationships across both organisations. But and I'll keep going back to it, to ensure that the SWestrans team members are fully supported to deliver key projects across our region. Thank you.
Ivor.
And under Schedule 1, can you tell me what Section 63A and 64B of the Act refer to? What functions transferred to this board, and under the Act, can we transfer any of them back?
don't know who can answer that one. I've got Douglas in the room that might be able to answer, but I'll let Simon as lead officer first of all.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware that there's the transference of any specific function as part of this. There's no significant or substantive statutory change in terms of the responsibilities of SWestrans as an RTP, nor are we suggesting it. The paper seeks to propose a change in the relationship and the day-to-day operational working of SWestrans staff to the benefit of the RTP. And in conversation with legal colleagues, there's not been any suggested impediment or obstacle that stands in the way of that. And in terms of the proposals that are put forward in this paper, they're suggested in terms of support and provision of additional capacity and expertise that SWestrans as an RTP can draw upon in the form of the council and the staff that it has. So in terms of any kind of statutory handing back of responsibility, that's not proposed as part of this paper, nor in terms of any conversation that I or colleagues have had, has that been suggested would be the case.
So the lead officer will still be in charge of the operational part, because the operational part was part of the functions, is my understanding, that transferred under the Act, under Section 3 here. It says the functions which are exercisable by Dumfries and Galloway Council by virtue of the enactment specified in column 1, etc., etc. The only two that don't transfer over are educational ones and social work ones. So are we now transferring the function back of looking at the operational side of the RTP's responsibilities back to the council? And if so, should we not write to the government and ask them if they just do away with the SWestrans and put it all back to the council, if that's a better way of working, because it's more integrated?
Simon or Claire, on the lead officer, my understanding is as an RTP we don't necessarily need to have a lead officer. Can you just confirm our standing orders?
Okay, thank you. I can confirm in the legislation that the postal lead officer isn't recognised, but in practical terms, obviously the board needs some person to hold to account and deliver on behalf of the board, and that's the lead officer that's in the standing orders, and that's when the board chooses perhaps to delegate a matter of urgent decision or whatever, that goes to the lead officer in consultation with the chair and vice chair. So it's important that the board has that lead officer in position, and the standing orders also recognise it's for the board to determine the process for the appointment of lead officer. So that's where you've got that recommendation 3 there as well. But SWestrans is accountable to the government. It's not a council committee, but the staff that support SWestrans are all mostly on council contracts. So I guess the council has that duty of care to whoever's in the lead officer position, and that could perhaps explain that dotted line as well. Whoever is going to basically authorise that person's leave or check their welfare, that the day-to-day stuff that needs to happen. So I hope that helps.
And since the RTPs were formed, I think we've always tried to, well, we've got a service level agreement. I think from day one it hasn't been changed, but it's that service level agreement, is my understanding, that we procure those services from council employees, including yourself.
Yes, Chair, we've had a service agreement in draft form, I would say, over many years. My understanding is it's never formally been signed off, but the SWestrans board and the council have always operated as if it was in place. So
this could give us an opportunity to get that service level agreement in place. Ivor?
So currently we're working out with a service level agreement. Why wasn't that put in place?
I can remember one coming to the board, was it last year or the year before, and it didn't progress because it needed an external solicitor to have a look on behalf of the SWestrans. The council solicitors did it for their side, but we didn't do it from our side, and it wasn't progressed. I don't know the reason why it didn't take forward, but I don't know if you can help, Claire.
No, I don't know the further detail on that. I do know there have been reports over the years on the SLA, but I can assure you that the council and SWestrans have always operated to the terms as if it was in place.
Thank you. Simon?
Chair, if it's not in place, why are we actually following it? That should have been in place as a matter of fact. And it's I would say, are we acting legally if we don't act within the terms of a SLA and how we actually procure services? Is it, you know, are we doing it within procurement law if we don't have that document in place?
Claire?
Just to assure Councillor Hislop that SWestrans has its own procurement standing orders and operates within those terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. And I was involved in some conversations in relation to that draft SLA at the beginning or the early part of last year, at which point there were conversations commencing in terms of this proposal that's now being brought to the council. So being brought to the board, I beg your pardon. So in terms of conversations with legal colleagues in the council, that SLA wasn't finalised and taken forward and put in place in expectation that there was the potential for a change in terms of the relationship between SWestrans and the council.
Thank you. I'm looking at Douglas, but I shouldn't really because he's external to the board for his. So we've got who? Oh, Karen, I'll bring you in.
Thank you, Chair. And I thought I would maybe just come in just now. I think, you know, just for absolute clarity, going forward, whilst the SWestrans operational team, I guess, will sit within that wider sustainable transport team, and whilst the strategic team will sit separate, the operational elements of the delivery of, I guess, the bus network absolutely will, sit with the council SWestrans or the team that sits within the council SWestrans team. But for me, that SWestrans lead officer will always have that oversight and that scrutiny to enable, to feed back through to the board. So, I guess whilst we're looking to change structures, the SWestrans team will always have that element of feeding back through into the SWestrans lead officer, to provide that approach. Going forward, we certainly know, I certainly know over the last year or so, the journey in terms of the re-procurement has been challenging at times because of those grey areas that we continue to find, and we've got legal advice for the board and members on that, and by doing this and by putting in place the two service level agreements that we're referring to in the paper is to try and remove some of those grey lines to allow both organisations to work through, I guess, the delivery of transport in its widest sense, and the delivery of the regional transport strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. I've got two more board members in before I bring observers in. So, Councillor Marshall, followed by Stephanie Mottram.
Yeah, thanks for letting me back in. There's a number of points that, that have been raised, Karen, Ida, etc. I think the first one with regards to the service level agreement, this is an issue elsewhere in the council that's been raised in education with thriving communities, with a lot of service level agreements not being completed and members not being able to see that. So I think going forward with regards to this, when the new SLA, I think the board need to see that SLA. In relation to, and it was again the question, it's the dotted line to the Assistant Director of Transport and Infrastructure to the lead officer. I can understand why that indirect line is there with regards to the strategic oversight, but also the lead officer is responsible for the operational side as well, but there doesn't seem to be any dotted line between the fleet and transportation manager and the SWestrans lead officer, because ultimately at the end of the day, although the fleet and transportation manager it looks as though he's taken on more of the operational part of that, there should be some, I just want to see some assurance that there will be this, there will be a working relationship between those two positions. So, because ultimately at the end of the day, the way I see it is SWestrans lead officer is also responsible for the operational side as well as the strategic side. And the third point with regards to the position being a part-time position, I think Karen mentioned that you benchmark that with similar roles within RTPs. The question is that a full-time role? I'm just a little bit concerned about even the strategic side of that, whether or not have, a part-time position, will it, if we advertise for that, will attract the right person that we need to actually fulfill this role. And just the last point as well, I think it was a little bit remiss of me to not commend as well the Gordon and his team, particularly with the bus tendering exercise and the fact that DGC buses have mobilised, and whilst there's still teething problems, we're working through those. I think Gordon and his team should also be commended for their role in DGC now being the second largest operator in the region.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. So, Karen.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Marshall, and thank you for your kind words to Gordon and his team, and I'm sure, not speaking for Gordon, but I'm sure he'll pass those positive comments onto the wider team. Just in terms of the SLA, going forward, or the two SLAs going forward, that Legal have suggested that we put in place in order to try and create those clear paths of working relationships. Absolutely, the board needs to agree those service level agreements and be happy that they are what we need them to be, both from a SWestrans perspective and a council perspective, and advice will be given just in terms of those, and whether SWestrans at that point require to seek further external legal advice. So absolutely, those would be brought back to the board for consideration and agreement. In terms of the structure within page 25, so that is shown line management arrangements, but absolutely going forward there would require and need to be that collaborative working approach between the SWestrans lead officer and the sustainable travel manager, as well as that overarching fleet and transport manager as well. And Gordon will come in and provide a little bit more detail in that. And if I could just cover your third point, just in terms of the part-time post. What I referred to in terms of benchmarking was for the job description and personal spec of that role, so that we could bring that up to date. The post itself for the SWestrans lead officer role has always been 0.5 full-time equivalent, and that's what we're suggesting will be progressed. If members will be aware, the previous post holder to that post was a full-time equivalent post, but part of, or half of that post covered the transport operations side, so hence the reason we're splitting that out. I'm looking at Douglas whilst I'm saying that. So hence the reason we're splitting that out, and half of that role will sit within the sustainable travel manager's post going forward, and the SWestrans lead officer will be 0.5 full-time equivalent. I'll pause there and I'll hand over to Gordon just to provide a little bit further information in terms of the structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Listen, to give you a wee bit of assurance on your point of working between the SWestrans lead officer and that fleet and transportation manager, for as long as I've been in this position, and going right back to when Douglas was still in his position, there was never ever a day went by without the two of us speaking about something, whether it was just through normal sort of peer-to-peer support, or whether it was on operational strategic issues. That relationship was always there, and it was always a strong one, and that's continued for Douglas left all the way to Simon being in position at the moment, that relationship is still there. It's still very strong, and nothing would work without that. So please take assurance for me that that'll continue, whoever's in that role. It is a necessary, you're right to highlight it, and I think it'll always be. And just one final point, if I can, Chair, and it's hopefully to give Councillor Hislop a wee bit assurance. The structure that's been proposed here, in reality, in some way, even if you go back to when Douglas was in post, this has always happened. There's always been collaboration between council teams and the SWestrans lead officer when he was on his own, apart from the 2 police officers, until there was a wee bit more a team there. That working on both sides of the organisations has always been there in some way or another. It's maybe just that it's never been brought forward in this formal structure. I think it's important to remember that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You want to come back in, Sean?
Just quickly on one point, just on basis of the way the discussions went today, and we're now talking about agreeing SLAs, and the board rightly is one group that should see that SLA, but it's really just to ask Karen to consider, because of the implications to the wider council, that some sort of report should go to the relevant committee, whether it be E&I or whatever, with regards to the structure and the way that we're going forward, and also with regards to the fact that we're entering into a new SLA. So I do think that the council, whatever relevant committee, should get some sort of report, depending on what we agree today.
Karen?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Marshall. Certainly, in future reports that we bring back, likely through E&I committee, to update in terms of transport and its wide sense, and sustainable transport, including home to school, including LUF, for instance, including ASN. Happy to include elements of working relationships and progress made between the SWestrans board and council teams. I do believe some of these elements are very much operational, and as you're aware, Councillor Marshall, the E&I committee is a strategic committee, but I think for me there's some really good news stories in terms of this, I guess, collaborative approach as we move forward. In terms of the structures, there's some really good news stories in terms of when we get there, in terms of the service level agreements, to reduce some of those grey areas and ensure that both organisations are aware of their responsibilities going forward. So absolutely, we'll highlight those within future reports as we bring them back through council committees, and particularly as part of that review that we're committed to following full council last year. Thank you.
And just before I bring Stephanie Morton in, is the service level agreement, is my understanding, when it came to the board the last time, I mean, it says in the report here, the Council Legal Services is preparing that service level agreement. However, they're doing it on behalf of the council. So therefore, the board needs to have sight of that service level agreement, and with external, legal services to come in and on behalf of the board, which is completely separate. So, the council's legal services cannot, decide for the board. It has to be somebody else, and that was one of the reasons why I refused to sign the last service level agreement, that we didn't get any external. So can I get assurances that the board itself can get its own legal services once this service level agreement, the details are put forward, so that I'm comfortable on behalf of the board, as chair of the board, that I would sign our side of the service level agreement. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. And it's a very valid and excellent point, in that the board needs to retain its independence in that respect, and has the benefit of independent legal advice from the council where it's necessary. So in terms of the conversations that I've had with the council's legal department and indeed the head of legal, we've spoken on a number of occasions on that particular point, not least with the head of legal herself, recognising that fact that she is representing the council, she cannot represent SWestrans. And so what we've agreed is that in my position as interim lead officer, in conversation with council legal, we'll collaborate to identify specific scenarios where council legal is not able to independently represent both sides. And so we'll agree on those potential instances where SWestrans needs independent legal advice, and that will be sought so that conversations can be had both with council legal and with SWestrans' independent legal advice. So if those circumstances arise, then we're both agreed that will take place.
Thank you. So I've got Stephanie Mottram. I don't see any other board members wishing to come in, and then I'll move over to observers. So Stephanie.
Thank you, Chair. So it's just obviously to acknowledge Karen and Gordon in terms of the excellent working relationships that have taken place, and I'm sure that's kind of smoothed the ground and allowed progress in terms of any agenda for either sustainable travel or SWestrans. Just for obviously, and I do acknowledge that in terms of resources are very scarce right across all public sector, and I just wonder in terms of competing priorities as resources get scarcer, you know, seeking some kind of clarity on the process between, and I would imagine that might be part of the SLA, because how does that factor in terms of my concern is if some of that resource that SWestrans are able to access whilst things are okay, how that then fields in terms of competing priorities for Karen and Gordon and the team, and what is the process for that for the board to be able to, where do they have them discussions and how does that factor in? And again, is that something that's in the SLA? And I think for the SLA, I'd be keen to see some contract monitoring built into that as well. So we are seeking assurances in terms of that SLA being fulfilled and duties being discharged. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. So, Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stephanie, for the question. So, for me, in the whole, it will be built into the SLA. A lot of what you're speaking about will come down to team plans and how we plan the year ahead out in conjunction with SWestrans lead officer to make sure that we are taking cognizance of SWestrans priorities, whether it's the regional transport strategy, whether it's active travel strategy, whatever that might be, will be fed into the team plans to maintain that at the right priority level and to make sure that there's always resource dedicated to meeting those targets. Thank you.
Thank you. So if there's no other board members, I'll go over to the observers. Douglas, your name's been mentioned several times during the debate, so I'll bring you in first.
Thank you, Chair. And there's a lot I could say, but I'll keep it nice and simple. I think the proposed structure actually is consistent with statutory powers and functions of SWestrans, as long as that SLA is robust enough and actually separates those lines and the reported lines and various other structures, along with contract monitoring. The handing back of powers is exceptionally difficult. Scottish Parliament that would have to do that, and I would suggest that's not a way forward. The other thing that needs to be considered here is that the standing orders, the existing standing orders with the lead officer, need to be clarified and updated to ensure that independence of the lead officer and that they are accountable only to the board. I understand they need to feed into to the assistant director, but that's for day-to-day signing off of leave, signing off of other things, etc., and for ongoing discussions with the council partnership. It's not been managed by that position. It's an independent position responsible only to the board. So I think the structure is there. There's a bit of work to be done on the SLA, and I think, as you say, Chair, and various other members have said, that it's the critical element here, and it needs to be looked at very quickly as part of this. And one other thing, the Sustainable Travel Manager post is also another critical post here, because that will be the link between the lead officer and the remaining of the SWestrans team. So I would just seek to understand if that post is being advertised in a similar time frame as it's intended for the lead office. But other than that, I think the proposal is fine in terms of legality, etc., as long as those critical elements are undertaken at speed, but to ensure that the board has fed into that and made sure that they are clear that they are being represented properly throughout this. Hope that helps.
Good advice. Nobody wishes to come in, but Karen, okay.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks, Douglas, for your advice and comments. Absolutely couldn't agree more. The SLA does need to be strong. It does need to be to point, and it needs to, I guess, deliver. You know exactly what both SWestrans and Dumfries and Galloway Council require it to deliver. So we need to ensure that it's correct and robust going forward, which we will do jointly together. And obviously, as previously said, there'll be legal advice on both organisations' sides. And I think just picking up on the contract monitoring that Stephanie brought up and you brought up as well. Absolutely, that needs to form part of that. In relation to the standing orders, I'll maybe ask Claire to advise if there would be an update required on there and what process we would have to go through for that one, and then I'll bring Gordon in just to update in terms of the Sustainable Travel Manager post.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, any amendment of standing orders requires a decision of the board, so we could agree to look at that today, pending this moving forward. Currently, the standing orders do include the protocol arrangements as an appendix, where the lead officer currently as is, recognising that currently dual role and possible conflicts are in place. So obviously that would require to be removed from standing orders, and yes, we could look at strengthening or providing further clarity on the role of the lead officer, because yes, they are ultimately accountable to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you, Chair. Douglas, just on the Sustainable Travel Manager, it'll be slightly behind the lead officer, just the way that the Council's evaluation team work, but it'll be hot on the heels of it, because you're right, it's a pivotal position that'll work with the lead officer. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Don't see anyone wishing to come in, so if we move to the recommendations, which one is the integration of SWestrans operational staff with Dumfries and Galloway Council's transport and operations services, and two, the recruitment of part-time SWestrans lead officer to oversee the strategic function of the regional transport partnership. And recommendation 3, which is up in the chat there, agree that the Chair and the Vice Chair, on behalf of the Board and in partnership with the Assistant Director of Transport and Infrastructure, Dumfries and Galloway Council, shortlist, interview and recommend a candidate excuse me, for SWestrans lead officer ahead of the Board agreeing the appointment of the appropriate meeting. So we're happy to Ivor.
Chair, relatively happy, other than I would like to see the SLA in draft form prior to the integration, where we can put what we call in planning a suspensive condition. Once it's in place, fire ahead with this. But I think we could go through the recruitment process at this time if we need a permanent position.
Thank you. I think that's competent, Claire.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Chair, if you wanted mention of the SLA and the decision for the minute, and also you could note that any required changes to standing orders would be made to reflect the decision.
I think that would be appropriate. Yep, getting nods in the room. So everyone else online, okay? Thank you. Now move on to agenda item 6, which is SWestrans, excuse me, active travel updates and draft planning for 2026-27. We've got Grant Coulthart is here to assist with this report. Anything to add to the report, Grant?
Nothing further to add, Chair, thanks.
Thank you very much. I'll just open it up then to board members first of all. Don't see anyone wishing to come in, so observers. Oh, I've got Laura Moody.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really good report. Just a couple of questions around marketing of bus services. I'm a little bit concerned that timetables alone are not enough to get more people using the buses, and particularly about signage on the mobility hubs. Can we make sure that that's really clear physical and digital signage for bus users at the mobility hubs? And other than that, just really your plans for engagement with bus users within the active travel forums. I'm worried about silos being created, especially for rural passengers.
Okay, Grant, can you respond?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. We'll take note of that, and we'll take on board points that Laura's given us.
Thank you very much. No other comments, questions? Okay, we'll just move on to the recommendations, which is one, to note the outcomes of the 2024-25 programme, note the progress and achievements in the delivery of the 25-26 programme. Oh, a latecomer, Sean, I've just seen your hand going up.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. It's just with regards to one of the awards. I think it's right at the bottom of the awards. It's the ACTS. It's support for provision of local bus service. I'm just wondering, was that an award for the 80 service, the Arran service, and the Moffat service, or is it something different?
I'll bring Simon in.
Thank you, Chair, and through yourself, Councillor Marshall. So you're correct. So the Annandale Community Transport Services, as part of the community grant agreement, as part of the Transport Scotland People in Place programme, is indeed a contribution to Annandale Community Transport Services in terms of expanding their capacity and operation of services. And as part of that, that they are indeed operating the 74 more fitted on Dumfries and indeed the Annan 80 service previously operated by Stagecoach Cumbria.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you very much. So back to the recommendations. 2 was to note the progress and achievement of the delivery of the 2025-26 programme outlined in the report, and 3 is to note the progress in developing active travel behaviour change people in place proposals for 2026-27 funding, and 4 is to approve the active travel infrastructure 5-year programme. Happy to do so. Okay. Thank you, members. Now move on to agenda item 7, which is the Levelling Up Fund project update. Gordon Bryce is here to assist with the report. Have you anything to add to the report, Gordon?
One thing, Chair, if I can, please. It just
yes.
it goes back to Laura's question on links to the active travel paper. If you have a wee look on social media under Moving Stories D&G, you'll see some of the decos and the signage and the marketing that you'll also see on bus stands across the region, which relates back to the mobility hubs. And we're hoping to take that forward in the future as a wee bit more marketing, not only for the mobility hubs, but for the network as a whole. So, Moving Stories D&G. Thank you.
Thank you, that's helpful. So I'll open it up to debate on the Levelling Up Fund project updates. Nobody online? Okay, I'll open it up to observers. Oh, I've got Keith, light hand. Oh no, I've got Keith first of all, and is that Laura wanting to come in as well? Right, Keith.
Sorry,
Walters.
Chair. Yeah, I was a bit shit. Yeah, just one question really. On page 63, on the Levelling Up Fund for bus improvements, I was pleased to see that it says the contract's going to be awarded for a supplier who will deliver real-time passenger information at 100 bus stops across the region. Because this obviously has been an issue before about delivering real-time information. But my understanding was that the system we used before, we were unable to to sustain it. So I just wondered what sort of actions are we taking to make sure that if we do get this real-time passenger information, it's actually sustainable?
Gordon.
Yeah, cheers, Chair. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for your question. So part of the procurement on this will include some ongoing maintenance for the first few years, and on top of that, the team and I are doing a piece of work specifically on the hubs on how they can be sustainable going forward, i.e. produce enough revenue and income streams through the e-bikes and the hire cars and the other infrastructure that's associated with them to make that sustainable, and that would include some of that real-time information. The real-time information is also, it's not one size fits all. It will be dependent on whether it's a stand or a stop or whatever it is. It will depend on the size of it, which makes it a wee bit more manageable as well.
Thank you. Has that been helpful, Keith?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Moody.
Thank you. I've got one sort of technical question and then one wider question. The technical question is just to check, does Q4 in the report mean Q4 of this financial year, or is it next financial year? And the second question, will the RTPI system be compatible with open data feeds for journey planning apps? That might also help to make it sustainable in the long term.
Thank you. Q4 this year or next financial year?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Laura. Yes to both.
Thank you very much. So I don't see anyone else coming in. Okay, we'll just move to recommendations. And the recommendation is members of the board are asked to note the update on the Levelling Up Fund. Are we happy to note that? Yep, nods in the room. Okay, now move on to agenda item 8. This is the Climate Change Plan Consultation Response. We've got Kirsty Dunsmore is here to assist. Unfortunately, it's not been possible to provide the board with an Appendix 1 in advance of the meeting, so that's in my chair's notes, Kirsty, but I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll just provide a wee bit of context to that. So this report was issued to the board with the anticipation that the Council's response to the consultation would be available at the time of this meeting, but unfortunately it's not available today. So we wanted to provide the board with enough time to consider the consultation response, so we'll bring it to the 27th of March board meeting, and just to provide a wee bit of background information of how that's happened. So the consultation response was considered at the Climate, Environment and Biodiversity Subcommittee on the 21st of January, and there was a number of amendments from members to that. So the team have now been working on making those amendments before the submission to the consultation through the Scottish Government portal. So it will be available by the March board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments? No? Okay, thanks for that update, Kirsty. So we'll look forward to the report coming to the next board. So we move on to agenda item 9, which is the local bus network updates. The Simon Bradbury is here to assist, so over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I have nothing further to add in addition to what's included in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll open it up to board members. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of points on this. I think one of the complaints that a lot of us are getting now is just on, and I'm glad to see within the report we're more or less ready to go out and put the new timetables up on the bus shelters. It says it's in progress. Have you got a timeline for, I think they're being printed, etc. at the moment, but have you got a timeline for when those will be put on bus shelters across the region? Also, as well, welcome the work done by SWestrans to reinstate or to provide an alternative service for the 80 service in Annan. It looks as though it's been well used. At the moment, it's only operating in the morning up to lunchtime, but it's really just, you know, based on feedback. A lot of people that use that are either disabled of mobility issues or, you know, elderly. So really appreciate the development of that. So potentially that can actually extend not only in time, but also maybe the routes as well. And I think that's something that we can work with the transport, Arundel Transport to develop. So it's really just to kind of seek that reassurance. And the last point is just, I've just noticed on the first map, and between Annan and Gretna, there's no indication of Eastriggs or Dornoch on that, on which the 79, and it says there the 179, is it not the 379? Or so I'm wondering at this late stage whether or not those two settlements could be included on the map.
Thanks, Sean. Simon?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for your queries and questions, Councillor Marshall. Happy to take each of those. So firstly, on the timetables, so through these local bus network updates to the board, we've been consistent in terms of we've been providing the board with an update in terms of the timescales for the updating of timetables in the stops and shelters. I think as a team, we regret the time it's taken for that to happen. It's been limited in terms of resource of the team, but also you'll have noticed in terms of the updates that have continually been fed to the board in terms of improvements that we've made to services in response to feedback from members such as yourself, but also local communities in terms of how the new contracts that commenced on the 7th of August last year have landed, and opportunities to introduce tweaks or changes to ensure that they support and service the communities as best as possible. So on the one hand, it's been a struggle in terms of providing the resource to get all of those changes into Novus, the data software system that contains all of the timetable information, but on the other hand, we don't want to complete that in advance of further changes coming through. So we're really pleased that we've now, on the one hand, completed the exercise of updating the software, and on the other hand, dare I say it, touch wood, it feels like in terms of the opportunities for improvements and tweaks of timetables, they're starting to settle down, and the network itself is starting to reach a point of stability, which is not to say that we won't continue to accommodate and take on board and recognise and, where possible, introduce further improvements in future. So the team is working really hard at the moment, as we mentioned earlier, under the SWestrans staffing structure paper. It's a really great example of members of the SWestrans team working alongside members of Gordon's transport and operations team, and those timetables are being prepared and will imminently be printed, and with support of Gordon's team over the coming weeks. There'll be teams of people going out across the region to update those timetables and stops and shelters. So we should start to see those across the region really soon. Appreciate your point about the 80 service in Annan. Really pleased that Annandale Community Transport Services were able to support without a single day's gap. On the day that Stagecoach Cumbria and North Lancashire moved out, Annandale Community Transport Services commenced their operation of the 80 and the 74 from Moffat to Dumfries. So it's been a great example of partnership working with them. Huge thanks to them for the work that they did over Christmas, and we were working kind of right up until the end of Christmas Eve to kind of finalise the arrangements and get timetables online. So great piece of work from them to get that service in place, but we've been in continual contact with them around kind of teething issues that have surfaced. So as you mentioned, we were aware in advance that Annandale Community Transport, in terms of the funding that they had available, couldn't support the continued resource of a driver past lunchtime. So for that reason, at the moment, and also in terms of the vehicle that they've got available to put on the route, it is limited to a slightly contracted timetable, and also a vehicle which isn't of offering the level of accessibility that we'd like. But we're continuing to work with them. Annandale Community Transport Services have been great, and they've identified different opportunities for them to bid for additional funding, and they're doing that in an effort to try and ensure that they can offer the best possible service on that Annan Town service. So not making any promises, but we can certainly commit that we're working hard as are they in terms of introducing further improvements on that one. And thanks for your comments on the map in the appendix. It's not too late, and make this point to anyone on the board. We really welcome any feedback on that. We've shared it with colleagues across the Council of SWestrans. We've shared it with operators who fed back. So a great example of a couple of points there where we can still make those changes. And the intention would be that those maps would be introduced across the display cases and shelters as a kind of simplified schematic version of the network. So any additional feedback or thoughts or comments on the maps, really welcome.
Thanks for that, Simon. Yeah, I think the one that I mentioned, I think if they can include Eastrig's Dawn, and Rig, that would be great on that, so that there stops on that line. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. Councillor Hislop.
Hopefully it's a quick one. The 120 service, Langham Town Centre, revised timetable, any initial feedback as to whether it's pleasing the customers?
Simon?
Not too much feedback just yet. I think in conversation with local members, the Langham community missed the bus service that they used to have. I think they'd had that the service that was in place for a number of years, and I think some of the population of Langham missed the consistency and the stability that they have with their services. So I personally spent a lot of time with the local ward officer, with the local community council lead, and also the elected member to try and understand what within the confines of the contracts that we let and the best value that we got through letting those contracts to Telford's coaches as to what variants we could introduce that would better support them. So what we did in discussion with Telford was what was in line with what they asked for, which is a kind of reasonable amount of time for residents at the north of the town to spend in the supermarket at the south of the town. And I think we've done that. So I'm really hopeful that that supports them better, and I continue to be in touch with the local member on that.
Thank you very much. No other board members. Will open it up to observers. Luke?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions on the map. I did kind of make a list of things, well, errors really, about it. For example, like the 358 between Stranraer and Girvan is missing, and the X95 between Carl and Edinburgh. And also, there isn't a key to actually identify what the lines mean. So you've got, for example, the 79 and 385, it shows it's supposed to go through Dalton, but the 79 doesn't go through Dalton. And on the Dumfries map, where it just says Dumfries Town Centre, it doesn't mention White Sands, Burn Statue or Great King Street, so I'm not sure what help that would be to people waiting there to know what routes go from where and where they are located. And then in Stranraer, on the map, there's just the random word academy, which I'm presuming is supposed to reference where it is, but there isn't any routes going to it or any connection shown to it, and it isn't shown, for example, in Dumfries, there isn't a word for Dumfries High School, the academy. So I'm just wondering why this is. Thank you.
Simon?
Really valuable feedback. Thank you. I've jotted down those notes, but really welcome an email from you with just capturing some of those and any further thoughts you've got on it, which we'll intend to try and incorporate. So thank you for that.
Yeah, if you could, everyone could pass that on to, whether it's the youth council or whatever, try and get that feedback back to Simon, that'd be great. So I don't see anyone else. Oh, sorry, I've got Laura Moody.
Thank you. Really happy to see the return of the 74 service. The petition there was set up by a DG Bug member who is delighted. And also very big fans of the schematic bus map. People are really happy to see that. I'm just wondering if it has gone through an accessibility checker. I'm a little bit concerned that the sort of blue font might well fade in some of the sunny shelters and be quite hard to read.
Yep. Feedback's always welcome. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your comments, Laura. I too am pleased that the 74 is now back in place and is supporting residents of Moffat and Beatwick to get to Dumfries before 9 AM. So I was really pleased that we were able to put that in place. Also pleased that you're encouraged with the schematic bus map. As I mentioned, that's not the end of the line for this map ahead of printing. further amendments and errors, as Lucas pointed out, can be incorporated, and indeed have been having one or two conversations over the course of the last week or 10 days with colleagues in communications who've offered the support of graphic design colleagues in terms of just further designing up the map, and also on my request to ensure that it's fully accessible. So yeah, that will be incorporated as part of the plan to roll it out across the region.
Thank you, Laura. Stuart?
Just a brief one, but I noticed that some locations were also missing towards Stranraer Way between Newton Stewart and Gatehouse. It made no mention of places like Creetown and Carsleuth, as well as some more locations between Newton Stewart and Kirkconnell or Glenluce.
Yeah, lots of locations. Can we add these to the maps?
You certainly can, yeah. Thank you, Stuart. And again, if you wouldn't mind just dropping those in an email to us, then very happy to try and incorporate any additional changes. I suppose with a very small caveat, which is that it is a schematic map, and so the intention was that it's easily understandable, and we don't want to crowd it with detail, but no, I think the points you made there are really valid.
Thank you very much. If there's no other comments or questions, we'll go to the recommendations. So members of the board are asked to note the further improvements to the bus services introduced across the region and changes introduced in response to community feedback, and we welcome any further feedback, particularly around about the maps. So thank you very much. Now move on to agenda item 10, which is the revenue budget monitoring report for the period ending 31st of December 2025. Gillian Ross, I see you just popped up online, so anything to add to your report, Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that your previous financial support in terms of Janet has taken flexible retirement. So we're currently in the transition process in relation to the support that will come forward in relation to SWestrans. As part of those arrangements, you'll note that I have changed the appendix slightly and the overall approach in terms of the recognition of staff costs. So you'll see quite a significant change in terms of the extent of the expenditure that's recorded there. That is explained at 3.3 of the report in terms of that general approach, but happy to take any questions in relation to that.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up to the board members. Not seeing anyone online. Ivor?
There is a slight overspend. Are we confident that that will be brought back into line? If not, will that be a requisition to D&G Council for repayment?
Julian?
Thank you, Ivor. Yes, as noted in the report, and you'll see that I've pulled that out separately in terms of that is a target for SWestrans to seek to bring that potential overspend back into budget. So that is the key consideration at the moment, and that will be the approach that will be taken. As you're aware, SWestrans doesn't hold any reserves and doesn't have any resources from which to pull on. So if that position did come to fruition, it would end up having to be funded by the council in relation to that requirement. But obviously, as we've indicated, we are seeking to contain costs within there to ensure that that is not the case.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall, Sean.
Thanks. Yeah, it mentions, I think, in the report at 3.4, the additional cost of the interim provision on the 246 bus route for Wallace Hall Academy. Do you have the actual costs of that at the moment, or what the projected costs are for the end of the year?
I do have those details, but I would maybe seek, because I've not been on the board before, I'm not sure whether that's information I should disclose in this forum. If I can receive guidance as to whether that is the case, I can give you the exact figure in terms of what that cost is.
I'll just seek governance guidance, first of all.
Thank you. I was going to say there's another report on the agenda today as an exempt item, and I'm sure that will be discussed fully there.
Thank you. So I don't see anyone else wishing to come in. Okay, happy to move to the recommendations, which is members of the board are asked to note the forecast revenue outturn for 2025-26 as from the 31st of December 2025. Happy to note. Yep. Thank you very much, and thanks, Gillian. So we'll now move on to agenda item 11, which is the Capital Expenditure Programme 2025-26. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. 2025/26 to 26/27 update. We've got Grant Coulter is here to assist. Anything to add to the report, Grant?
Nothing further to add, Chair, thanks.
Okay, so I'll just open it up to board members first of all. Don't see anyone wishing to come in. So I'll move to observers. Laura?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we have a timescale for when the new bus shelter procurement framework will actually begin delivering shelter replacements and new installations.
Thank you. Grant?
It's my understanding that there's a procurement process on its way and is in the middle of being conducted by the Levelling Up Fund project team. So hopefully it should be very, very, very soon. And also the installations should be very, very, very soon, because there's definitely there's a time limit on those installations and that money being committed and spent. I don't know if Gordon wants to come in. No.
Gordon?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. We can come back to the board with a specific timeline on that. I don't know the answer to that sitting here right now, but Grant's right in saying that it is going through the procurement process at the moment, and happy to feed that detail back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure everyone would welcome that. So I don't see anyone else wishing to come in. So we'll just move to the recommendations. Is one, to agree the capital programme for 25-26 to 27-28 as outlined in the report. Note the update on capital spend in the 25-26 financial year. And 3 is to agree the proposed capital programme for active travel infrastructure at 4.0 for the next 5 years from 26 to 2031. Depending on Dumfries and Galloway's capital allocation and the external funding for active travel infrastructure. We're happy to agree, note and agree. Yep. Okay, thank you, members. So we now move on to agenda item 12, which is any other business deemed urgent by the Chair due to the need for a decision. I have no other business to take requiring an urgent decision. Thank you for those members of the public and observers for attending today. Agenda item 13 is the exclusion of the press, members of the public and observers. It is recommended that members of the board agree to consider the following item of business in private and exclude the press, members of the public and observers from the meeting, given that the report contains confidential or exempt information in respect of paragraphs 6, 8 and 9 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Act 1973. We're happy to agree. Okay, so those members